Weighted dips are one of those exercises that people either love or they completely destroy their shoulders with. And what I see all the time when someone struggles with dips, pain, instability, elbow issues, shoulder discomfort, the first thing they try to fix is their technique. They start changing elbow cues, shoulder cues, posture cues, or they try to copy how very strong athletes dip. And in my experience, that's usually the wrong order. The first thing I change is not technique. The first thing I look at is the setup. Because if your setup is off, your body doesn't have the options to move well. I don't want to force athletes into a specific technique. My goal is always to allow for the most natural movement for that athlete. Strong athletes can get away with a lot. Different leverages, different joint tolerances, and years of adaptation. A beginner or intermediate copying these exact techniques usually takes away from our movement options. And when movement options disappear, joint stress goes up. So instead of cueing harder or forcing positions, I build a setup that lets good technique emerge itself. If I have to micromanage your movement, something earlier is already wrong, right? So what I mean with that, if the setup isn't good, you cannot expect to improve your technique throughout the movement, right? When load is applied, you are trying to create internal stability, you are trying to produce force, you are already doing lots of work, right? You cannot change the technique easily if you are out of positions, right? So when someone has problems with dips, these are the levers I go through. So this is basically my troubleshooting checklist. So the first thing I look at is grip width. Why grip width? Because grip width decides how much shoulder rotation we need, where the elbows need to go, and how forces are distributed. A more narrow grip usually comes with a bigger range of motion, more stress on the shoulder, more emphasis on the shoulders, right? And a wider grip usually comes with a shorter range of motion, a little bit more degrees of freedom in the shoulder, but also has a downside. The more narrow grip will feel more stable for most people, in particular for the ones that tend to deal with a lack of internal rotation at the shoulder, and the wider grip usually feels more unstable, in particular for those people who tend to have a lack of internal rotation at the shoulder joint, right? Because that wider grip reinforces more internal rotation at the shoulder, and if we are internally rotated too much in the first place, which most people are, that aren't very strong in pressing exercises, I suppose if you're one of those guys, you tend to have some sort of rounded shoulders. Got you there. And rounded shoulders is a closed off rib cage. That's nothing else than the body trying to gain some sort of internal rotation because he's lacking internal rotation. So he's trying to move there to fake that. And for these people, a more narrow grip would likely be better. The grip probably feels unstable and weak. Most people tend to jump ahead instead of looking at the wrists in the first place and the grip width, they tend to cue elbow position. And that's backwards, simply because the elbows tend to react at what happens at the wrist, so basically your grip. Obviously, as we're talking about grip width, we also need to talk about the grip itself, right? There are different ways on how we can actually grip the bar, and each position will have a different impact on what is happening up the chain. Important, there is no universally correct grip position, okay? It will matter based on your structure and your presentation, okay? I cannot recommend one grip for everyone. That's not possible, okay? It needs to be individualized towards your needs. So keep in mind what we just talked about in terms of the grip width and apply these concepts in conjunction with the grip position. So we can either grip a little bit more internally rotated and use more pronation, or we externally rotate the hand more and use more supination. Small change, but big effect. And the grip can be a great tool to actually give your shoulders a little bit more room to move, right? As we've already discussed, especially the guys who tend to present with those rounded shoulders, a more externally rotated position of the hands might be better. This will help to open up the front side of the rib cage, allow for genuine shoulder extension. So the elbow should track behind the body without the shoulders dumping forward. The only question I care about when it comes to grip position is, where do your shoulders actually feel like they can move? Comfortable doesn't mean easy. It means non-restrictive. Now, let's talk about the third lever, elbow position. And this is actually where most people get stuck. The internet loves tuck your elbows or flare your elbows. But elbows are not a starting point. They are an outcome. If your elbow position feels forced, your grip width and your grip position are likely off. More flared elbows often tend to create more shoulder stress. More tucked elbows tends to increase triceps demand, but they also increase setup demand. So if I have to consistently cue your elbow position, I know your setup is off. Obviously, that's not everything I look at when troubleshooting the setup for the weighted dip. There are a few more things like the shoulder position. How much shoulder elevation do we use? Yes, shoulder elevation is nothing bad when it comes to a dip. It's actually needed. And if someone is telling you something different, I can tell you that person might be lying to you. And then there are things like belt position, the length of the chain, foot or lower limb position, right? These things can have a huge impact on how your dip setup looks like and how many movement options you have available. But these things will dive a little bit too deep into the nuances, and yeah, we won't cover them today. So if you're interested in such things, then please join the waitlist for my biomechanics mentorship. I will be hosting a new cohort very, very soon. And there we go through my coaching model, how I assess, troubleshoot and adjust along the way. And yeah, if you're not interested in that, that's totally fine. If you want more guidance and someone who does that for you, then also my one-on-one online coaching is open. Same link below in the description if you want to join. Most problems aren't because dips are bad. They are because the setup doesn't match the athlete. And the order always matters. First setup, then observation, and then technique refinement. If the setup is right, technique needs fewer adjustments or fewer cues, and the movement usually reorganizes itself. The best dip technique is the one your body chooses when you stop fighting it. So if your dips don't feel right, don't just adjust your technique. First, adjust your setup, and technique will follow. And if you haven't done yet, please help me grow this channel by subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing it with your friends so people don't miss out on any gains. And yeah, that's a wrap for today. See you in the next one.